Threats and Capabilities meets today to receive testimony on Department of Defense artificial intelligence initiatives. And I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. I do apologize. We have a vote series going on right now. So at some point, Senator Peters and I may have to switch on and off. We'll run down and vote accordingly. But I do want to thank you for being here. I'd love to welcome you. We have a very distinguished panel joining us today, ladies and gentlemen. As highlighted in the NDS Commission report, the U.S. must stay ahead in several emerging technologies in order to maintain or regain a warfighting advantage. These technologies include hypersonics, directed energy, artificial intelligence, 5G, and quantum computing. Russia and China are aggressively developing these capabilities and in some cases have already surpassed or will soon surpass our technologies. Without action, the U.S. may find itself at a technological disadvantage in future conflicts. Over the next few months, this subcommittee will focus our efforts to ensure the department is well positioned to outpace our adversaries and maintain a strategic advantage in these key technologies. Today, we will focus on one technology of particular importance, which is artificial intelligence. The recently released Department of Defense Artificial Intelligence Strategy makes clear AI is poised to transform every industry and is expected to impact every corner of the department, spanning operations, training, sustainment, force protection, recruiting, healthcare, and many others. AI has the ability to provide powerful new capabilities to our warfighters that we are only beginning to imagine. When applied to back office functions and operations within the department, AI will be critical in boosting efficiency and increasing the effectiveness of limited resources. With such broad potential impacts, it is important that the department move quickly to adopt these capabilities so that we don't lose the technological edge. Our adversaries understand the critical importance of AI. Last year, the Chinese government released a strategy detailing its plan to take the lead in AI by 2030. Less than 2 months later, Vladimir Putin publicly announced Russia's intent to pursue AI technologies, stating, "Whoever becomes the leader in this field will rule the world." Both of these countries are investing heavily in military applications of AI to achieve a warfighting advantage. The United States is also investing heavily in AI applications. Over the last year, the department has initiated several important efforts to accelerate the adoption of AI, including the establishment of the Joint AI Center, or JAIC, the development of a DARPA AI Next campaign, and the release of the DOD AI strategy. These efforts demonstrate the extent of the AI transformation already underway within the Department of Defense and the priority that is being placed on growing these capabilities. However, with these important efforts comes the challenge of coordinating hundreds of disparate AI efforts across multiple offices and organizations. I look to our witnesses to help the committee better understand how AI can be adopted more rapidly, how coordinating the initiatives already underway within the department can help us harness this powerful technology, and where we must invest in future research to ensure we maintain a long-term advantage. And again, I thank our witnesses for being with us today. I look forward to their testimony, and I would turn to my ranking member, Mr. Peters, Senator Peters. Thank you. New ranking member joining us. This is our first subcommittee hearing of the Congress. Senator Peters, I welcome you on board. Thank you very much.
Well, Madam Chairwoman, thank you. It's an honor to be with you. I've enjoyed working with you over the years, and we'll continue to do that in the next 2 years in this Congress. And also, I'd like to thank the gentleman for you being here today for your testimony. You know, artificial intelligence is already impacting our daily lives through commercial products and services, from applications as simple as Alexa to very complex systems like self-driving automobiles. AI has huge implications for our national security as well. For example, it will enable new capabilities in intelligence analysis, autonomous systems, as well as cybersecurity. At the same time, AI can create new threats in these and other areas that can be exploited by our adversaries. I hope in this hearing that we can hear from our witnesses on the Pentagon's efforts to position itself in the rapidly changing world of AI, from the more near-term activities of the Joint AI Center to the long-term, high-risk, high-payoff research efforts at DARPA and the Defense Innovation Unit. The current AI systems that exist today only exist because of decades of research in computer science, control systems, microelectronics, and other fields. There are many amazing commercial capabilities available today, yet AI is still relatively primitive to what we all think it can be. We need to continue to invest in fields like computer science and electronics, but also in research in areas such as our understanding of how machines and people learn and can work together to make sure that that promise becomes a reality. I would like to understand how the DOD is working to move AI capabilities quickly into fielded systems, as well as how the Pentagon is developing a long-range strategy on R&D of new capabilities. I hope we can discuss how we are engaging with the best minds in defense and the commercial industry, Silicon Valley, government labs, and universities to address many of these challenges. I would also like to learn about efforts to ensure that the DOD and the nation has the expert workforce that we will need within government to stay at the leading edge of this technology. And finally, I'd like to recognize that General Shanahan is a distinguished graduate of the University of Michigan, earning his commission there through the ROTC. The University of Michigan is one of many academic institutions in Michigan that prioritizes artificial intelligence research, particularly for the development and testing of autonomous vehicle systems. General Shanahan, I know that U of M would love to host you back on campus to see the work that they're doing on AI and autonomy and its relevance to your work. And I hope that you, and as well as our other members of the panel, are able to take a trip to Michigan sometime soon. So I thank the chair again for holding this hearing, and I certainly look forward to our discussion.
Yes, thank you very much, Senator Peters. And we will start with Dr. Peter T. Highnam. And Dr. Highnam became the Deputy Director of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, what we know of as DARPA, in February of 2018. Prior to coming to DARPA, Dr. Highnam was the Director of Research at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency on assignment from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. And prior to that assignment, he also served 6 years at ODNI's Intelligence Advanced Research Projects activity, initially as an office director and then as director. Dr. Highnam, we welcome you, and you may start your opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Turn your mic on. It's on. Okay. Chairman Ernst, Ranking Member Peters, I'm pleased to be here to represent the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency and share with the subcommittee DARPA's work to advance AI technologies. I'm going to begin with a little bit about DARPA's history in this field. In 1960, shortly after DARPA was created, ARPA was created, one of the first information technology officers that we had gave this quote: "It seems reasonable to envision bringing computing machines effectively into processes of thinking that must go on in real time, time that moves too fast to permit using computers in conventional ways. To think in interaction with a computer in the same way that you think with a colleague whose competence supplements your own will require much tighter coupling between man and machine than is possible today." So back then, when computers were large, were room-sized, when they were being used for computing missile trajectories and so on, this man saw what was possible, saw the insights that were becoming available, and saw the push that we're still working on, which is changing computers from tools to partners. And that actually is the history of AI investments by DARPA for the last 60 years. Okay. So then is also quintessential DARPA. This man had, again, one foot in defense, seeing the mission and seeing what was needed, and one foot in the technology side, and framed the problem using use cases, knew what had to be done, and started driving. It's unlikely that he realized, that he thought that there would be 6 decades of investments and hard work that followed that to get to where we are today. I like to say that after 60 years of pushing, AI is an overnight success. really within the last 10 years, when you think about the current technologies. A lot of transitions and successes over the decades, much accomplished and much still to do. DARPA describes the investments in AI using a waves construct. The first wave at the beginning, for the first 20 years or so, normally known as describe. So this is where knowledge was encoded in rules, if A, then B. And so if you look inside the tax, if you do personal taxes today, there's a rule-based system inside there that was what 40 years ago would have been called AI technologies, now is just computer science or IT. That's the price of success. It's no longer AI, it's just commonplace. And then in the beginning in the mid-70s, the technology, science was put in place to begin what became machine learning. The theory was put down, but only in the last 10, 15 years, we now have the compute cycles, we have the data availability, and that's when the current wave, the second wave of machine learning really took place and really came into being. And now we're looking past that at DARPA into what comes next. So we have two waves of technology. One was descriptive, one was recognizing situations, classifying, and so on. And now we have to be able to explain, to really build the trust between these systems and the people who are using them and working with them in real time in difficult, stressful situations. But building the trust so that they really can become partners. And this is the role of explanation. It's a great time to be at DARPA because we're now on the brink of a lot of really exciting things. And that's the genesis of the current initiative, the $2 billion investment that we've said we're now making in AI technologies. That said, there's a brittleness to the current technologies, and the tools are immature still. We don't have an engineering discipline behind AI technologies, and there's issues that I'm sure everyone will talk to you about missing data volume, missing data quality, provenance, and so on, for training second-wave systems. And these systems tend to have unexpected failure modes. So in front of you, there should be an example of the brittleness of AI. These are drawn from the academic literature. You may have seen these before. In the first picture on the left, there's a panda, which you and I look at with all the history that we have of looking at these critters. And on the right, there's also a picture that looks like a panda as well, to us. The difference is that in the digital representation, a certain amount of noise represented by the middle picture was laid on top of it, and a highly trained second-wave classification system, machine learning system, went from classifying that picture as a panda to now it's a gibbon with high certainty. The fragility of these methods, these are very literal methods. There is no semantics. There is no intelligence. The second example is perhaps of more concern, and this shows a stop sign in a physical situation, so think autonomous vehicles. And to you and I, again, it's a stop sign. It has a certain shape. To a trained system, to a highly trained system, it's no longer, when you put that little white sticker or that yellow sticker onto the stop sign, it's now classified as a speed limit sign. This is you can think in terms of autonomous vehicles, the brittleness and fragility of the systems. You can also think in terms of adversarial endeavors. It takes camouflage and deception to a whole new level. So I wanted to, very important to point those things out. Now, so today we have autonomy. We have a lot of work, successes in cyber from first and second wave technologies. We have novel hardware, high performance hardware, low energy hardware coming into place. And yes, and we have a lot of tools, and hundreds of thousands of people are being trained and really wanting to use machine learning. We have to go to the next step, this common sense reasoning, being able to explain where this inference came from. We have to get there. Otherwise, the trust won't come into place. So what we've done is to talk about, in our new initiative, robust AI, dealing with adversarial AI, both unintentional and intentional, high performance in terms of compute cycles and minimizing energy, and delivering radically new capabilities. This is the genesis of the AI Next campaign, creating systems capable of reasoning with generative, contextual, and explanatory models. We already have over 20 programs running in AI, new programs, research programs started. We have over 80 programs in the agency. About 1/3 of the programs in the entire agency now are either creating AI technologies or aggressive users of those technologies. And last, we really needed to point about workforce. We really had to get more people engaged. So typically we put out a call for proposals, research proposals, people apply, and 6 to 9 months later, if selected, they're on contract. We have something called AI exploration, by which we are driving the research community to explore the space of the third wave aggressively. We post a topic, and we award contracts within 90 days of posting the topic. We've now done this 6 times. We've invested so far on the order of $45 million in this, and there's tremendous uptake from the research community at these opportunities. All unclassified, all fundamental work. So, from 60 years ago to now, I don't think Mr. Licklider at the time would have anticipated that the Department of Defense would have an AI strategy. It's a huge success and recognition, and that the President would sign an AI executive order. Who would have thought? So, game-changing capabilities for the Defense Department and the world. From 60 years of investment, much accomplished and much to do. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. Mr. Michael Brown is the Director of the Defense Innovation Unit, DIU, at the U.S. Department of Defense. DIU fields leading-edge capability to the military using commercial technologies faster and more cost-effectively than traditional acquisition methods. Prior to that, Mr. Brown served as a White House Presidential Innovation Fellow at the Defense Department. He has also worked as CEO of Symantec Corporation and as CEO of Quantum Corporation. So thank you, Mr. Brown, for joining us today. It's good to have you here again. If you would, please go ahead with your opening statements.
Thank you, Chairman Ernst, Ranking Member Peters, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me here today to discuss DIU's efforts in AI. As you said, about 6 months ago, I joined DIU as a director, and having led a number of technology companies, most recently Symantec, I've witnessed how new technology like AI can fundamentally redefine how we live and work and how we fight wars. Before joining DIU as a director, as you mentioned, I worked as a fellow responding to the Secretary of Defense's request to understand China's investments in early-stage technology firms, many of which were AI-focused, and its technology transfer and implications for national security. As you mentioned in opening remarks, China and Russia have already recognized the enormous commercial and military potential of AI and are investing heavily with aims to become dominant. By 2025, China aims to achieve major breakthroughs in AI and increase its domestic market to reach $60 billion. To achieve this target, the Chinese government leverages civil military fusion, where by law, every commercial AI innovation is immediately transferred to the Chinese military. China also leverages U.S. talent and resources by establishing research institutes in the U.S., investing in AI-related startups in the U.S., recruiting talent in the U.S., and building academic partnerships. Russia, as you mentioned with Vladimir Putin's comments, is similarly focused on building its AI capacity, but is behind the U.S. and China in terms of overall investment, research, and startups. In the face of great power competition, DIU is working alongside with the rest of DOD to maintain our technological edge, not only in AI, but other dual-use technologies as well. Accessing mature AI-driven technologies from the commercial sector is an essential component of the Defense Department's artificial intelligence strategy, and the paradigm shift from a defense industrial base to a national security innovation base prescribed by the National Defense Strategy. DIU's AI portfolio focuses on understanding, tracking, and vetting commercial companies' abilities to solve high-impact problems identified by our military leadership. AI projects today include work with the Air Force, Army, Navy, and components, as well as Joint Chiefs of Staff. As a foundational technology, the DIU AI portfolio specifically prioritizes projects that address three major impact areas where AI is proven to excel commercially. Here are three examples. First, computer vision, adding automation to object recognition and infrastructure assessment. DIU is prototyping computer vision algorithms in humanitarian assistance and disaster recovery use cases. Second, large data set analytics and predictions, making sense of massive data sets and patterns more efficiently and cost-effectively than human analysts. For example, DIU is prototyping predictive maintenance applications for Air Force and Army platforms with the potential to save the department billions of dollars. And third, strategic reasoning, mapping probabilistic chains of events and developing alternative strategies to inform top-down planning in environments characterized by uncertainty, missing information, and speculation. DIU is prototyping an application that leverages AI to provide insights to high-level strategic questions. With these projects, DIU engages across the department on AI and makes its commercial knowledge and relationships with potential vendors available to any of the services, service labs, and components. We already have in place a strategic partnership with JAIC, which we've agreed upon with General Shanahan. Simply stated, DIU will prototype commercially successful AI applications and measure their relevance to mission imperatives. And if successful, we transition those to JAIC so they can be scaled and integrated into their national mission initiatives. We look forward to working closely together with JAIC. DIU also works with the Defense Innovation Board and will work with the newly established Congressional National Security Commission on AI to leverage the best practices and learnings from the commercial software industry executives who participate on that board. Cultural divides and ethical differences are often blamed for the lack of closer cooperation between DOD and Silicon Valley. But more often than not, the true deterrent is misaligned economics. Enabling DOD to be a better customer for early-stage companies will not only help DOD acquire the best commercial technology faster and cheaper, but will also provide access to the ideas of sought-after AI talent that DOD may not be able to attract. And the more we collaborate with the private sector on mutually beneficial projects, the more opportunities we'll have to engage in an open dialogue about the applications and principles for the use of AI. DIU plans to continue its focus on AI as a key technology portfolio, solving DOD problems with commercial AI solutions to bring the department new capabilities and encourage non-traditional technology firms to work with DOD as part of the National Security Innovation Base will be a priority. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. And last, certainly not least, we have Lieutenant General John N.T. Jack Shanahan. And General Shanahan is the Director, Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, Office of the Department of Defense, Chief Information Officer at the Pentagon. General Shanahan is responsible for accelerating the delivery of AI-enabled capabilities, scaling the department-wide impact of AI, and synchronizing AI activities to expand joint force advantages. General, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, Ranking Member, distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before the subcommittee today on the department's artificial intelligence committees. I'm honored to serve as the first director of DOD's Joint AI Center, or the JAIC. I've been in this position for just over 2 months. Previously, I served in the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, where for 2 years I was the director of the Algorithmic Warfare Cross-Functional Team, also known as Project Maven. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is rapidly changing an ever-expanding range of businesses and industries. It offers the opportunity to transform every corner of the department, from multi-domain operations at the edge to back-office business functions. As described in the 2018 National Defense Strategy, or NDS, it is also poised to change the character of warfare. Thoughtful, responsible, and human-centered adoption of AI in the DoD will strengthen our national security and transform the speed and agility of our operations. Last June, then Deputy Secretary of Defense Shanahan directed the DOD Chief Information Officer, Mr. Dana Deasy, to establish the Joint AI Center to accelerate the delivery and adoption of AI-enabled capabilities, scale the department-wide impact of AI, and synchronize the department's AI activities. In parallel, DOD submitted its first AI strategy to the Congress as an annex to the NDS. Last month, the department released an unclassified summary of DOD's AI strategy, doing so on the heels of the President's signature of the executive order on AI. The JAIC's missions and functions nest well under the principles and objectives outlined in the AI executive order. JAIC's formation also dovetails Section 238 of the fiscal year 19 NDAA. Additionally, JAIC will benefit from and help bring to fruition recommendations of the new National Security Commission on AI. I was privileged to talk with the members of the commission yesterday when they met for the first time. I know Senator Heinrich was also there. The JAIC is the focal point of the DOD AI strategy and was established to provide a common vision, mission, and focus to drive department-wide AI capability delivery. I want to highlight three primary themes for our approach. First, delivering AI-enabled capabilities at speed. JAIC is collaborating with teams across DOD to identify, prioritize, and select mission needs, and then execute a series of cross-functional use cases to demonstrate value and spur momentum. We need early demonstrable wins to show practical results in the art of the possible, followed by scaling across the enterprise. Projects fall into two main categories: National Mission Initiatives, or NMIs, and Component Mission Initiatives, or CMIs. NMIs are driven and executed by the JAIC as broad, joint, cross-cutting AI challenges, whereas CMIs are component-led, but are able to make use of JAIC's common tools, libraries, best practices, and more. Our emphasis on rapid iterative delivery of AI complements the department's ongoing work at the other end of the AI spectrum in fundamental research and development, as you heard from Dr. Highnam. Our first two NMIs are predictive maintenance with a Special Operations Command and U.S. Army H-60 helicopter use case, and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, in which we will field AI capabilities in support of natural events such as wildfires and hurricanes. We are also getting a head start on a planned fiscal year 20 cyberspace NMI designed to use AI-enabled capabilities to improve event detection, network mapping, and compromised account identification. At the same time, we are now in the early problem framing stage for another proposed NMI in fiscal year 20 that will be more oriented on the NDS, National Defense Strategy, and operations against peer competitors. And we are also in initial discussions with the military services, components, and combatant commands on the applicability of AI to help with solutions in areas as diverse as talent management, suicide prevention, preventive medicine, and information operations, among others. The second theme is scale. As I know firsthand from Project Maven, scaling AI across the enterprise is hard, but it's also the only way we will realize the full benefits of AI in the department. JAIC's early projects serve a dual purpose: to deliver new capabilities to end users, as well as to incrementally develop the common foundation that is essential for scaling AI's impact across DOD. We will put this foundation in place in a way that aligns with DOD enterprise cloud adoption. And the third theme is talent. We built the initial JAIC team with representatives detailed from across each of the services and other components. Today we have 30 people, growing to over 50 within the next 5 months. We do not receive our permanent manpower until fiscal year 20. For the JAIC to succeed, we must attract and cultivate a select group of mission-driven, world-class AI talent, to include enticing experts from the tech industry to serve with us. The success of human-centered AI and human-machine teaming within DOD requires growing and sustaining an AI-ready force, one that is conversant in the language of AI, willing and able to operate with a new kind of speed and agility. In closing, the JAIC is now up and running, and we're open for business. Thank you for your strong support in driving momentum in this critical area. I look forward to continuing to work with Congress as we advance the adoption of AI across the department and use the JAIC to accelerate our progress. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. I look forward to your questions.
Absolutely. And again, thank you to our witnesses for being here today. And I'll go ahead and start with the questioning here. And then when Senator Peters, oh, here he comes, when he returns, I'll go ahead and start with my questions. And then, Senator, I'll turn it over to you. Again, thank you very much. This is a very interesting topic, and I think we can learn a lot from the discussion today. To all of our witnesses here, if you could share, how are the AI efforts in R&D coordinated among DARPA, Jake, and the services? And General Shanahan, you had mentioned the synchronization of AI activities, and you had mentioned R&D. If you could all share, how do you synchronize that information? How do you share that information? What are the best techniques in doing that? And Dr. Highnam, if we could start with you, please.
So whenever DARPA starts a program, a research program, there's a development of use cases. We seek to understand if we succeed in that program, who cares, who benefits. So that means that our program managers are out talking inside the services all the time. In fact, across the national defense establishment writ large. So there's a natural inbuilt connection before we even agree to start a high-risk activity. And that's true whether it's hypersonics or quantum or AI. This is normal business. Now, in fields like AI technologies, which are software tools with a lot of tail to them, sustainment, deployment tails, I personally, as an R&D guy, am really happy to now have the Jake stand up as a partner to take on that 6.4 and on, that engineering, deployment, sustainment tail, because it's going to make, I expect it will make transitions into practice a lot, not simpler, but more straightforward. I fully recognize just how much hard work General Shanahan and his team are going to have to do to make that end of the business happen.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So, Senator Ernst, the most important area for us to collaborate with is Jake. So, as I'm sure you recognize, DARPA has a different time frame in mind that we all benefit from being longer term. DIU's time frame is 24 months or less. So we aim to get commercial companies on contract within 60 days and then a prototype fielded within 2 years. And in software, we're trying to go faster than that, a year to 18 months. So in coordinating projects, our strategy with Jake, which I'm very pleased to be in partnership with General Shanahan, is we'll go out and look at what's successful commercially, including vendors, and then if we prototype something successfully, we're the trial, and we want to scale it, then we start working with Jake for what's the infrastructure we need and how would we make that available to all of the services. For example, we're working together now to get a vendor that we have worked with on prototype to get a production contract that will be with Jake, so any of the services can take advantage of that. For our project-based work, we also coordinate with the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. We have a quarterly meeting with General Selva, not just on AI, but our other projects to make sure we're doing things that make sense to the joint forces. And then we have monthly meetings with each of the Assistant Secretaries for Acquisition, so Army, Navy, Air Force, Dr. Jetty, Dr. Roper, Hunter Gertz, to make sure that what we're working on makes sense with their priorities. The last thing we want to be doing is a lot of independent projects that don't have leverage across the department.
Correct. Thank you.
Senator, while the number may vary depending on who wrote it, I think in fiscal year 18, the number was 511 projects that had AI as their primary focus across the department. And the question is, are all those 511 projects towards a common end in support of the National Defense Strategy? This question of synchronization is essential to where we're going in the Jake. And it comes down to governance and oversight. And Section 238 of the NDA actually directs governance and oversight for this very reason. We have a lot of work to do in this area. I would like to start by just getting our arms around all of the projects that will come out in fiscal year 20 to understand the amount of funding, what the projects are for. not to threaten somebody's budget. That is not the intent of the JAIC, but we owe it to the department and to the Hill and to the public to be able to account for all of those projects and the money that's being spent. So I take that very seriously. We're still in the building phase right now for the JAIC, but we are in early discussions about what governance looks like for the JAIC and how do we bring all of us together to understand what are the projects going towards. A $200,000 research project at University of Michigan may be exactly what we need for a long-term insight into a particular part of autonomous vehicles. The question is, do we know about it at a central level so that the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary of Defense are comfortable about what the department is doing in artificial intelligence? So we take this very seriously, and as Dr. Highnam said, we're also in discussions just between DARPA and us on where is that transition from DARPA ready to field over to the JAIC. And we are in early conversations of that. We don't have programs identified yet.
Very good. Well, I appreciate that. And going back to what Dr. Highnam said is, of course, who cares and who benefits? I think bottom line, that is a great way to put it. And if you're not sharing information and going through that synchronization, who cares and who benefits? We don't really know. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you. I will step out and ranking member will take over the meeting. Thank you.
So if I may one go back on that. So in all of our research programs, we also seek transition of the technologies that come out. We don't just do the research, this is defense, we're pushing it. And we seek transition agreements with the end users, wherever they may be in the services or in the IC.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. No, I think I'd like to pick up a little bit, Mr. Brown, on you were discussing the commercial sector and how we're reaching out to the commercial sector to be bringing in a lot of this technology. And certainly that's what we're seeing as late. Probably some of the most exciting advances are happening outside of the DOD in the commercial space, and because of all the applications from the financial industry to banking to insurance to automobiles. I mean, all of it is going to be transformed in significant ways from artificial intelligence. But it's important for the DOD to be able to bring that in and use it effectively. And there are a number of factors that usually, I think, stand in the way of that happening, from our very cumbersome procurement process, to say the least, that we have that scares companies away from being involved with the federal government, a slow and often late budget process that we have here, there are enhanced security reviews. I mean, there's a long list of challenges, and that's what I'd like you to elaborate on as to what challenges do you envision as we try to adapt some of these commercial applications into military use. And then General Shanahan, if you'd follow up on Mr. Brown's comments and Dr. Highnam too.
So, Senator Peters, you're exactly right, and I am benefiting from the wisdom of folks who came before me in setting up the Defense Innovation Unit, because we largely address by how we were formed some of those constraints that you talked about. So first, procurement process. So we have set up a special solicitation process. It's open, anyone can respond, where we do not start with a list of detailed requirements, assuming we know how industry should solve a problem we might have in DOD, but we start with something very simple, sentence or paragraph saying, this is the problem we're trying to solve. What can you offer us that will help address that? So that gets us away from, again, very detailed requirements to seeing what does the commercial sector offer. Then we try and move at commercial speed and commercial terms, meaning we don't have onerous requirements for IP, and we don't take companies through something that is unfamiliar to them. We'd like them to view DOD and government as just another vertical as they look at other commercial segments they want to pursue. So again, commercial terms and speed are important for us there, because our mission is how do we expand the national security innovation base? How do we get more vendors working with us? Then as it relates to the budget process, that's something that we are looking at now. How do we ensure that there's a transition if we successfully prototype a use case? How can we move quickly to get that fielded? So we have to use a variety of techniques. Some of them you've helped establish, like the Rapid Innovation Fund. Fortunately, in the AI sector, that's made much more easy with the partnership with JAIC, because now we've got infrastructure, folks who can help make this available to the rest of the services. We talked about the contract that we're working right now, production contract anyone will be able to draw from. And as it relates to security, we try and move away from classified use cases and translate those to a commercial problem. So we try and work almost exclusively in an unclassified realm. So we're conscious of those constraints, and we have ways to make it easier for commercial vendors to work with us. I think another benefit is being able to work and access the talent, the ideas that come from the folks in the commercial sector, because we may not be able to attract all the talent. It's likely we will not be able to in the AI fields within the Department of Defense.
Great, thank you. General?
Senator, the legislation is clear, commerciality first and foremost. And for the 2 years that I worked in Project Maven, we took that approach. Now, there are always going to be some unique problem sets within the department that require some in-house development, some in-house solutions. But we went with commerciality every time. And I would say I was fortunate in the form of a Marine Corps colonel who was an operator and intelligence professional, but also a level 3 certified acquisition pro. And he was able to work within the confine of the DFAR. And people are surprised that we use the DFAR to that effect. There are additional authorities we've been granted. I haven't had to use them yet in the JAIC because we're so new in the stand-up of the process. But there are ways to work the system, thanks to as Michael Brown just said, the existing solutions are already out there in commercial industry. And as I get further into standing up to the JAIC, what I'm looking for is many arrows as possible in the quiver of acquisition and contracting to be able to pull for a different situation on any given day, whether it's an other transaction authority, commercial service, or just using straight up DFAR. But it is not easy to do it, but there are ways to work within the system, and we do put commerciality at the beginning of every project.
So you said it's not easy, but there are ways. So you believe that you have the authorities that you need, at least at this moment, or is there more that this committee
I do believe at this moment we have the authorities we need.
Okay.
And I reserve the right 1 year into this to come back and make a different case.
Yeah, duly noted, General. Dr. Highnam, did you have anything to add? Microphone.
From the research aspect, looking at our investments in FY18, about 50% of our AI research investments were in industry. About 14% were in small business. So we have a very large coverage picking up and driving the development of the best ideas. About 1/3 went to universities. So those are the sources. And for us, as we look ahead to, again, technologies coming on board, maturing them, and to the examples I gave earlier, reducing the brittleness and just catering towards the engineering front needed for large-scale military deployments, we're addressing rigor, making sure they work in robustness. Second wave technologies applied aggressively to defense applications, and then creating and proving out the third wave of technologies, of AI technologies, again, creating them from, not from whole cloth, but from working with the companies and working with the schools to do that.
Great. Thank you. Senator Shaheen?
Thank you all very much. I'm sorry I missed your testimony earlier. In 2017, China laid out plans to become the leader in AI by 2030. What's our strategy to make sure, A, that doesn't happen, and B, that we are the leader as opposed to China?
I'll take a crack at that. This is obviously much broader than a Department of Defense strategy, and I think we know well how to win a tech race because we did it quite effectively the last time we were involved in one with the Soviets in the Cold War and afterwards. And it starts with what are we doing to invest in ourselves? The breakthroughs that Silicon Valley is benefiting from even today in our economy as we look at some of these software IPOs, Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, have come from federally funded research. So I credit DARPA and the other parts of the federal government that create those breakthroughs, internet, GPS, miniaturized electronics, et cetera. So I think it starts with what we do in federally funded research, education, so what we did to focus on engineering and science after Sputnik, Need to do that again. And then the national purpose. So what we have now with the executive order, how do we build on that to create a common purpose about this being important? My concern would be that how many Americans know about the national order on artificial intelligence, and how many young people are we reaching to inspire that this needs to be their mission? Because this technology race, especially on AI, is going to be multi-generational. It's not going to be lasting through one administration or two. So we've got to get the national purpose behind us to support then what we can do to leverage that in the Defense Department.
Well, so that raises the next question, which is, are we doing that?
I think you could always say we could be doing more.
Okay, what more should
There's
we be doing?
no time to waste in this race with China.
So
They
what-
have some advantages in terms of today, probably more patents there's more startup activity in terms of dollars invested, but the U.S. still has a lot of critical advantages in terms of our education system, what we're doing to actually pioneer things in terms of hardware technology to advance AI, the tensor processing units, et cetera. The activities like DARPA is working on with very long-term research in mind. I feel like the U.S. still has a lead there. We just got to take more advantage of that, what makes us special in this race.
And how concerned are we that not only is China making this commitment, but that they're stealing our intellectual property, which includes AI, and that we have not figured out how to adequately respond to that? I would say. You all may not agree with that, but that's certainly my view. I don't know who would like to answer that, General Shanahan?
Yes, Senator, and just carry on from what Mr. Brown was talking about earlier. This is not just a DOD question, whole of DOD. It's not just whole of government, it's whole of society. It's multi-generation to be able to build. If I look at bringing in talent, AI talent into the JAIC, I can ask the services to give me your best AI talent. There's just not enough to go around. It will take decades to build this. So this is one for the executive order on AI. It's a start, but there has to be an implementation plan, which I know is coming. But also the National Security Commission on AI will lay out some of these very factors about how do we do this as a society, everything from grade school education to military courses, bringing in concepts of coding all the way from the very beginning. Now, to your other point, Senator, about intellectual property theft, every one of us has a concern about that. It's been taking that much more seriously in the past 2 years than I would have said 5 years ago. Beginning to understand the scope of the problem, just using Huawei as an example, having a whole of government approach to convince people not to use that technology because it has an entry point into places in China. This is something we're working very hard at in protecting our own systems, protecting our data, without getting into any details. In the project I worked on, the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence Project Maven, but also as we stand up the JAIC, is protecting our data, doing everything we can to make sure somebody doesn't understand what that data is, how we built our algorithms. There is so much more than this, but I believe the sounding board of what China is doing just within the past 2 years is now making a difference. Much more to do, but we are taking a different approach that we were in the past.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I would argue that as we look at the education system, that one of the things we should recognize is the importance of immigration to that, and that as we look back over the last 30 or 40 years, that one of the things that has been so important to our system of higher education are those people from around the world, the best and the brightest. And when we have a system that says, we don't want you to come here to college, and we want you to go home as soon as you're done, that's not in our interest. So I would argue that that needs to be part of our strategy as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Senator Heinrich.
I want to start by thanking our chair and ranking member for hosting this hearing. This is an incredibly important topic, and one which we all need to be sort of educating our peers about, because as our guests today know, this is going to be a bigger and bigger piece of what we focus on in the next few years. And I'm really pleased to announce that this week we are officially launching the Artificial Intelligence Caucus in the U.S. Senate. So along with Senators Portman and Schatz, Gardner, and our chair and ranking member, we're looking forward to trying to work together to strike that right balance in developing the technology and the policies so that academia, our labs, private industry, and federal entities like the ones we have testifying here today can harness this to the benefit of the American people. AI is, as you said, really going to impact every sector of our economy, our society, not just the Department of Defense. And I want to start with Lieutenant General Shanahan, and thank you for your participation yesterday with the AI Commission. It's my understanding that the services and other components in the Pentagon right now have been directed to coordinate with the JAIC, with the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, regarding any AI initiatives that cost more than $15 million annually. Is that coordination happening?
Senator, it's not fully in place yet. It is my intent through governance and oversight within the JAIC to put that structure in place for the very reason that you said we have to know what they're spending it on.
So it all starts with knowing what we're doing and
Yes.
then building off of that. Do you have the authorities that you need to be able to do this part of your job effectively?
I'd say Section 238 will grant those authorities, and if I feel like we need any other authorities, we'll go back through the department, but I believe I have those authorities right now.
So as we look at this over the course of the next couple budget years, what should we be measuring the JAIC against in terms of metrics, and by what timeline?
When we talk about the JAIC and capability delivery, I'll divide it up into product delivery and then the rest of the JAIC. Product delivery is, are we delivering on the national mission initiatives and component mission initiatives? On the national mission initiatives, have we put results in place that are making a difference with a return on investment? That won't be an instantaneous measure, even with Project Maven, which has been going for almost 2 full years right now. The return on investment takes a while to measure in AI. As we talked about yesterday at the National Security Commission, this is transformational, and when you field the first Sprint 1 algorithms, they are not game-changing. They're designed for the operator to say, they're not good enough, here's what I need to do, and get to Sprint 2, and we'll get to transformation. But we need to show that we are delivering capabilities. For the component initiatives, I need to give an incentive for the services and components to come to the JAIC. How do I do that? 1, funding. 2, joint common foundation, or a JAIC common foundation. I have data for you to use. I have tools. I have frameworks. I have some cloud and edge services. I'm a place that one-stop shopping, which is a really, that term doesn't always work as well as it sounds on paper, but I need to give people an incentive to come into the JAIC to help them accelerate their own AI initiatives. Yes, sir.
Talk to me a little bit about yesterday at the AI Commission meeting. I thought it was really helpful what you said about the cultural nature of this and the multi-generational aspect of this. So talk about how we manage that, because the people manage it, yourself included. We're not going to have the same intuitive access to this world that the people getting out of coding schools right now or have today. So how, as the Pentagon, do you manage this cultural transition within such a large organization?
Well, I would put culture and talent management at the top 2 of my priorities in trying to change the department in bringing in artificial intelligence into it. And as I said yesterday, there's a combination of top-down pressure and bottom-up innovation. For the most part, I believe the bottom-up innovation exists. We have to give it an outlet, a vehicle, to give people room to go out and try things new and different, allow them to fail, and just show that they have a different way of doing business that we can listen to them. And there are now new programs in some of the departments, like Kessel running with the Air Force. There's more and more of a culture change beginning to happen, but it's not part of the institution yet. What we have to do is institutionalize it. So we have to give the top cover in forms of resources, authorities, and policies, as well as going out and giving capabilities to people in the field. One of the things I say is that absent somebody getting to play with AI, it's science fiction. They need to see it, to smell it, to touch it, and really see what it can and cannot do. And part of that is experimentation. We have to, it's almost like a war period between World War I and World War II. We can go out and actually experiment with these capabilities. But to do that, we have to develop the capabilities. It's a little bit of a vicious cycle. We have to get capabilities in the hand of operators and analysts, try them out, war game with them, try new operating concepts, and then figuring out what works and doesn't work. That cycle is a little slow and get going right now. So when you ask about time frame, I would say a year in some respects, in terms of delivering capabilities, 2 years to begin to say, are we changing the department? As you heard from Colonel Cooker yesterday, we're 2 years into this, and I would say not everybody accepts the change that's coming.
Great. Thank you, General. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Heinrich. I think we'll go ahead and do a second round of questions, and I will reserve my questions until the end so we can make sure that the rest of our senators have an opportunity. So Senator Peters, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General Shanahan, there's a concern out there by many that about the possibility that AI-enabled systems and autonomous systems will cross some ethical lines, especially in operational settings. And I know that the DOD AI strategy includes efforts to think about AI ethics and safety issues as you're developing the systems. And as you just said, you got to get them out in the field, you got to work them, but it probably makes sense to be thinking about this on the front end as well as we go forward. So if you, for the panel here, if you could highlight for us what your biggest ethics-related concerns are for the possible use of AI systems by the military and how you're working to address them.
Yes, Senator. Every technology introduced in the department comes with a question of the lawful, safe, and ethical use of that technology. AI is not different in that respect. It has some differences in terms of what you would call explainable AI. Is an AI making decisions based on data now instead of algorithms, rules-based algorithms that have been programmed into it. We are thinking about this from the very beginning. Based on my work in Project Maven, I can tell you the algorithms were fielded are light years away from Skynet and fully autonomous weapon systems. But we know we have to start thinking about the policy implications of that. If you were to ask where the highest temperature is outside the department, it's on the question of lethal autonomous weapons. Autonomy in weapon systems is governed by DOD policy today. And we are partnered, and the JAIC is partnered with the Defense Innovation Board, who has a year-long project underway about AI principles for defense, doing open hearings, being able to hear from anybody that wants to come in and talk about their concerns about the ethical, safe, and lawful use of artificial intelligence in DOD. I will tell you it's something we take extremely seriously. We will go at this as we've done with other technologies through a very rigorous and disciplined test and evaluation, validation, and verification process. We have not fielded an algorithm in Project Maven without having gone through that rigorous and disciplined process. As early as we are and as brittle as those algorithms are, we put them to that process. If we start talking about full autonomous systems, that level of rigor and discipline will only continue to increase. But in terms of what we are most concerned about is its performance of algorithms. As Dr. Highnam said earlier, some of the algorithms have failure modes that we have to take into account. And that DOD policy or directive that I referred to has several sections on what we have to go through in the department to be ready to test and field technology that involves autonomy. But fully autonomous weapon systems with artificial and general intelligence is what people seem to think is the worst case. I think of artificial narrow intelligence. Anything we field will be fielded in accordance with the law of war, international humanitarian law, rules of engagement, and commander's judgment. I mean, these are things that we take into account for every technology, even more so because people don't know all about the implications of artificial intelligence in our weapon system.
Yeah, and as you go through that process, certainly that's encouraging that thought process is occurring within your organization, but I think we have to also realize that some of our adversaries may not be constrained by some of the same kinds of processes that we go through and could present an unacceptable risk to us from a national security perspective, as well as the men and women who go in harm's way facing autonomous systems that operate under a completely set of rules than what we would think is appropriate here in the United States. So I think that leads to my last point, and that's thinking of some of these higher level concerns and policy concerns and what we should be thinking about globally in terms of these technologies. And I know when we're talking about AI, we often turn to technical experts and engineers, and often technical experts and engineers make comments about ethics. But I have found that's a somewhat narrow approach, and we've made those kinds of mistakes in the past. And so my sense is, are you and Dr. Highnam, are you also working with philosophers and ethicists and folks who think deeply about some of the moral questions associated with these technologies, or should we be doing more?
There's always more to do. We had an AI colloquium last week, a DARPA colloquium, about 700 people there. And one of the most interesting panels that we had was on ethics, led by Richard Danzig, who used to be the Secretary of the Navy. Fascinating discussion. So it's very much a part of the technical discussions that are going on. We are looking at that. Now, wearing a slightly more technical hat, there are some issues at the moment that we are very concerned about with a technical solution. One is the implicit bias. The field of data science and machine learning or machine training has significant overlap. And there's a tendency among people who are human, as they build these systems, to pick data sets, to cull data sets, to unintentionally put leads or, again, bias into how they're doing things, which means the system could preferentially recognize Joe or Jane based on, just because of the way it was trained. So that's a piece of the puzzle. And we have research programs going directly against that. A large one underway now is understanding group biases. Again, this is common to data science and machine training. The second area is about to do with deployment of technology if we don't fully understand its failure modes. Back to the point I made earlier. One of our programs, Assured Autonomy, has a very interesting premise, an important one. So we have an autonomous vehicle, a flight vehicle, a ground vehicle. You can make it a lot more flexible in how it deals with unexpected conditions by adding some second wave AI technologies to the puzzle. So the condition shows up, it adapts and makes changes. But again, if you don't really understand the failure modes, if you don't have that assurance, in the sense almost of a cyber assurance, that this is going to behave itself and operate within safe limits, then you put something on the street or in the air that's, you really have to take a little, you have to think hard about before you do that. So a lot of our research, again, is going into making technologies robust in that sense as well. We have multiple programs, research programs addressing different aspects of this problem. It's a very important problem.
Great. Thank you.
Senator Shaheen.
Thank you. Dr. Highnam, did I understand you correctly when you said, as we look at where AI is currently being developed in this country, about 50% of it is in large businesses, 14% small businesses, and a third from universities? Was that?
It's 50% in business, of which 14% overall.
Okay.
So 36% larger businesses, 34% universities, and the rest in service labs, the energy labs, and so on.
So the rest is from the public sector?
Yes.
Then.
Yep.
So if you think about past circumstances in our history, whether it was the Manhattan Project or putting a man on the moon, can we analyze the sectors that provided that technological innovation and figure out whether this is the right breakdown in terms of where AI is coming from?
So the answer is certainly yes. It's not something I've done. But to comment on that, if I may, this is the research phase. So we're finding these investments are not on systems that are in any sense deployable.
Sure.
But these are people, and we're finding them in industry with the really good ideas who propose to our research programs. And then as much of this technology evolves, they publish some, they don't publish some, depending on classification and so on. But a lot of the time, we want industry to make these technologies, as they're proven to work, to be commercial, to be incorporated into other products that then the department can buy back. I think that the days are gone when we can think about corralling hundreds of thousands or very large numbers of experts in such a hot technology area. So this is normal, DARPA's normal business mode, but I'm certainly going to take your question back for follow-up.
Well, I was just thinking about how do we encourage more experimentation, more research, and thinking about small businesses. So if we look at small businesses create 16 times more patents than large businesses. You know, 2 out of every 3 jobs are created from small business. So are there ways we can incentivize small business to do more of that research and innovation that we're looking at to provide the AI that we need? And I would argue that one program that is there that helps do that is the SBIR program, the Small Business Innovation Research Program.
So 2 answers. One, I'm sorry, was part of my preamble. One of the things we've done in our AI campaign is to set up something called AI Exploration. So in that, we post a topic of interest. Anybody is given 30 days to respond, and it's typically schools and small businesses who do that. And then we award within 60 days after that. So 90 days from posting to award, up to $1 million per award, up to about 18 months duration. And we've invested about $45 million so far since September in this activity, because you're right. This is a lot of the innovation, and this is us exploring in a space and giving them the grounds to do that. We've also recently revamped our small business approach to align it directly with our research programs. We're also encouraging moving directly to phase 2, and we also have an innovation accelerator as well to advise small businesses on how to take things commercial after they discover it, not just in AI, but across the board.
So are there other policy changes that we should be thinking about to promote? Should we be encouraging more set-aside for SBIR programs? Are there other ways in which we can promote AI that we're not currently doing? For any of you?
And we're seeing an awful lot of smart small businesses come forward, teaming with schools, teaming with big companies sometimes. So certainly those in the larger DARPA ecosystem understand how to work us.
I think this just emphasizes what you've heard from all of us, the need to work with commercial innovators in AI. I saw an interesting statistic that came from Congressional Research Service recently that in the 1960s, a third of the global R&D was U.S. defense related, and now that number is 3.7%. So it just speaks to the need to look outside, and I think what you've heard from all of us, DIU, that's our mission, so of course you'd expect me to say that, but we heard it from Dr. Highnam, General Shanahan, that we want to work with these successful innovators outside and bring that technology in, because unlike the Manhattan Project, working on one specific goal, AI is a horizontal technology that is infused in everything, or will be, and so that really speaks to the beauty of the U.S. capitalistic free market system so that we can benefit from all that innovation happening across. And I think our challenge is where do we pull that in from a talent perspective, technology perspective, and proven use cases, and how do those apply to the Defense Department?
And Senator, it's about messaging that, as has been said, AI, unlike any other technology in the past, has been, the equation has been completely turned around. It's commercial and not government. The message of the United States government, not just the Department of Defense, has an interest in promoting AI from the smallest company up to the biggest company. And with Project Maven, we had no favorites. Everybody was a player, smallest startup, all to the biggest companies in the United States. But getting the message that we want the business, and if they have their intellectual property to work with the government on, we want to take that. What I don't want to see is some of the best companies in the United States, some of the best intellectual talent we have out there being funded with VC money from places like China. But if they have to go somewhere and we're not giving them an opportunity, that's what's going to happen. So we have a role, I think it's a very serious role, is to communicate that we're serious about artificial intelligence. We need the capabilities you bring to the table, and the three of us represented here, from AI Now to AI Next, and Mr. Brown in between, sort of going out and doing the pilots and finding the right companies out there, that is a message we need to communicate. And I think part of that through the executive order on AI, but also the National Security Commission on AI that will come out with, I expect, some very weighty recommendations about a societal change in how we're looking at artificial intelligence.
Well, thank you. I appreciate all of those responses. If we're going to continue to be competitive in the rest of the world, then this needs to be part of our strategy. And, you know, if you're correct, Mr. Brown, that, you know, in our system that unleashes all of this innovation in the private sector, then we should be able to win that competition. But I think that there are policies that we need to put in place to encourage that, and we ought to think about which ones make sense to get where we want to go. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Absolutely. I will wrap up with just a couple questions, and I do want to thank you for the discussion. We've covered a lot of territory, a lot of very interesting territory. I appreciate the discussion on ethics as well with lethal autonomous weapons. I think that's something that we need to fully vet and explore even more. But what I'd like to do is turn back to the more mundane, everyday uses of AI if we can. And General Shanahan, you had, I think, had mentioned some of those uses. Of course, we have companies like Amazon and UPS and Walmart, and they do use AI for those back office types of tasks that you had mentioned earlier. Can you walk us through some of those tasks and where we might be able to utilize AI? And not big, sexy topics, but certainly if we can streamline the way we do business within the DOD, I think this would be helpful.
Yes, Senator, when you talk about smart automation, or in the vernacular of the industry, robotic process automation, it's not headline grabbing in terms of big AI projects, but it may be where some of the most efficiencies can be found. That's the case if you read the dailies in industry, whether it's in medicine or in finance. This is where early gains are being realized in AI. Some of the other projects we take on in the department are probably years in the making of return on investment. These other areas, I think, will be much shorter term return on investment. What we're trying to do in the JAIC, when I looked at this just a couple of months ago, we weren't even concentrating on this smart automation. I'm now trying to figure out how I stand up a small office, just focus on that. I don't see us leading that, but it's leading others to find out how to incorporate these technologies into their back office functions. And I've already met with the Chief Management Officer of the department, as well as the Chief Data Officer of the department, to have these early discussions. I'm convinced there will be lots of opportunities in back office functions, finance being, I'd say, the first one to take on to help augment people. I think people get very concerned right off the bat about being replaced. There's not enough people to go around for the most part. So this is about augmenting people and being able to do much more work than they were able to do with the tools, which in some cases are far too old, manual, laborious. These are about how to, if you see the demonstrations of a bot versus a human doing the same sort of manual task, there's no question who gets to the finish line first.
Absolutely.
So we're early in this process right now, but that's one I'm very interested in taking.
No, I think that's really important. One of the big discussions that we've had just in the last year was the DOD audit, and how do we arrive at a clean audit through such a large, what I describe as a large, animal. And is it practical to look at an application like that? Would it be helpful to guide us towards a clean audit?
I'd say the answer to that is yes. Scoping it will be the challenge, is finding out how big this is to go after the audit. But I know the Chief Data Officer, Michael Conlon, is looking at applications like this. There are big decisions made in the department with data done in a very manually intensive way. If those decisions can be made faster and better, that, of course, is something that the leadership of the department is interested in. So the answer to your question is yes, it's a question of understanding the scope and the scale of doing it.
Very good. And of course, the inventory purposes, acquisition program spending, you name it, I think that AI can help in those areas. It has been mentioned, maintenance as well, predictive maintenance on equipment and aircraft, so forth, would be very helpful as well.
And Senator, if I may just add on to the point, whether it's smart automation or predictive maintenance, as we're finding very early, the problems themselves are not massive, but the lessons learned are what we're really catching on to. It was just one use case of a helicopter, seemingly simple, but everything we're learning about data management, which would be no surprise to anybody in the industry who's dealing with artificial intelligence and machine learning. But those are what we're trying to collate and bring up to a higher level for the department about understanding what different standards, policies, authorities need to be in place to make this happen against all the different aircraft in the Department of Defense. And to your other point about, I call it a flywheel effect. Once a few people begin to understand what smart automation does, it will catch on. But nobody believes it yet because they haven't the benefit of actually seeing it work.
Absolutely.
So that's what we have to do is we have to show, it's the show me piece. We have to have people believe it's real and not just science fiction.
Absolutely. And with that, I will go ahead and wrap up this hearing today. I do want to thank the members of our panel for being here, and the flywheel effect. It starts here as well in Congress, and making sure that we are educating others on artificial intelligence and the applications for our DOD. So thank you again to the witnesses for being here and for educating us on what your jobs entail and how we can better use artificial intelligence. Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you.
This concludes the hearing of emerging threats and capabilities.